No time for 2026 World Cup in the USA had come anywhere near the noise level that has surrounded this particular summer. Nobody in football leadership expected the week to go the way it did, and nobody planned for the man who'd stood shoulder to shoulder with FIFA's president at photo opportunities, who'd been handed the FIFA Peace Prize in December, who'd been handed a complimentary World Cup final ticket right there in the Oval Office, to go on his own platform and tear the whole arrangement apart in public. The post was described by IB Times UK as a scathing rant against World Cup greed. It was not subtle. Ticket prices were predatory. The costs were out of control. The organization was squeezing fans for every dollar it could get. That very public break between two people who had spent the better part of half a year presenting a united front landed on social media like a lit match in dry brush. Within hours, it was everywhere. Tweets, stitches, dunks, reposts. FIFA's own comment sections filled up with variations of the same observation. Even the people at the very top think the prices are wrong. And that was just the latest episode in a 6-month sequence of moments that FIFA has found impossible to contain or meaningfully respond to. Not a coordinated campaign, not a formal movement with a mission statement or a manifesto. Just millions of individual football fans across every platform, coming from completely different directions, arriving at the exact same conclusion and putting it in the same language. Something has gone badly wrong with this World Cup. As of May 31st, 2026, 10 days out from the opening ceremony, let's walk through what that social media story actually looks like, platform by platform, post by post, and what it tells us about where this tournament stands with the very people it was supposed to be built for. The post that gave the online conversation its first real focal point did not come from a journalist or a politician or a famous footballer. It came from a man named Mohamed Sapa. He was the executive director of an organization called Patriotic Vision, which holds UN special consultant status. In January of 2026, he posted a few sentences on X. He had purchased World Cup tickets. He said he was canceling them. His reason fit into a single paragraph. He did not feel safe. He described the possibility of being classified as a threat, without charges, without a hearing, without a trial, without a phone call, without access to a lawyer. That post was not political commentary. It was a personal decision, explained simply and honestly by one person, and within hours it was spreading across football social media in every direction. Screenshot after screenshot, translated into 6 different languages, shared by accounts ranging from small supporter group pages to verified international journalists. Because it said something out loud that enormous numbers of fans from dozens of countries, people who had genuinely complicated feelings about the idea of traveling to the United States right now, recognized as their own internal voice finally finding words. From that moment on, the social media landscape around the 2026 World Cup changed. The conversation was no longer only about excitement and bracket predictions. It was also about whether to go, whether to trust, whether to believe. That shift was not a small thing. The 2026 World Cup was supposed to represent a homecoming for North American football. 3 host nations, 48 teams, 104 matches, the largest tournament in the history of the sport. The United States had spent years building toward this moment, and for a significant portion of the global fan base, the question had quietly moved from where will you watch it to whether I should go at all. TikTok ran with the grievance content faster than any other platform. The algorithm amplified it with remarkable speed throughout the early months of the year. One TikTok video, showing FIFA's official resale platform with a ticket listed at $1,499,985, the highest asking price on the exchange at any point during the tournament buildup, racked up millions of views. The caption on most versions was some variation of the same line. They are not even trying to hide it anymore. Another format that kept going viral was the screen recording, fans sitting at their computers, narrating in real time as they tried to navigate the ticket buying process. The countdown timer hitting 0 before the checkout could complete. The session expiring and kicking them back to the waiting room queue. Category 1 seats they had queued for hours to secure, turning out, when the confirmation email arrived, to have been assigned to a completely different section than what they had selected. Brett Prozini told CNN about exactly that experience. Hundreds of thousands of fans recognized it immediately because they had lived through the same thing. The data behind the anger was real. Between October of 2025 and April of 2026, FIFA raised ticket prices for more than 90 of the 104 matches. Prices across the three main ticket categories rose by an average of 34% during that window. The Attorneys General of New York and New Jersey would later subpoena FIFA over exactly these figures, demanding internal documentation on how those prices had been set and how seat categories had been defined and communicated to the public. New Jersey Attorney General Jennifer Davenport described the entire ticket purchasing experience as a gauntlet of confusion, fake scarcity, and exorbitant prices. New York Attorney General Letitia James issued the subpoena jointly, targeting FIFA's conduct at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, where 8 World Cup matches are scheduled to take place. The New York City Department of Consumer and Worker Protection joined the investigation, with its Commissioner Samuel Levine stating that allegations of artificially inflated prices and blatantly deceptive practices would be taken with the utmost seriousness. That was not the kind of legal language FIFA's communications team had prepared for 10 days before kickoff. The moment that brought the story home for American fans specifically, the moment that made it personal in a way that pricing charts and ticket queues could not quite achieve, was a short exchange between a player and his manager, USMNT midfielder Timothy Weah, playing for Juventus, preparing for a home World Cup on American soil. One of the most recognizable faces of the generation that was supposed to make American football feel culturally relevant. He said publicly in May that the tickets were too expensive. His manager, Mauricio Pochettino, dismissed the concern, told him to focus on football, not tickets. That dismissal produced a reaction that Pochettino clearly did not anticipate. American fans flooded social media with variations of the same point. The players who grew up in this country, who represent this country, who are supposed to be the reason this tournament feels personal to American football fans, even they are saying they cannot afford to attend. And you are telling them that is not their problem. The clip of Pochettino's response circulated widely. The comments were not kind. There is something about a coach telling a player not to worry about access to the sport that crosses a specific line with supporters. And that line was crossed in full view of several million people. On May 14th, FIFA confirmed the performers for the first halftime show in World Cup history: Madonna, Shakira, and BTS. The reaction on football social media was immediate, and it split cleanly along a fault line that had been visible throughout the entire tournament build-up. On one side, fans who felt this was a natural extension of the tournament's presence in North America, where sport and entertainment have never been entirely separate. The Super Bowl has a halftime show. The World Cup is now the biggest event on American soil. Of course there would be a halftime show. On the other side, fans who felt this was the single most visible symbol of a tournament that had drifted so far from what football actually is that it was now importing the Super Bowl structure wholesale, packaging the sport as a delivery mechanism for something else entirely. The phrase that appeared most frequently in the critical responses was not harsh or obscene. It was 4 words. This is not football. That phrase became its own kind of hashtag, without ever formally being designated as one, posted beneath FIFA's official announcement, posted under clips of Gianni Infantino defending the halftime show, posted under articles about dynamic pricing and the Attorney General investigations. The same 4 words, used by thousands of people, functioning as a shared expression of something individual, fans struggled to articulate more precisely, but felt with complete clarity. The halftime show controversy touched something that the ticket pricing debate, for all its documented specifics, had not quite reached. Pricing is about access. This was about identity, about what kind of thing this tournament actually is, and who it is actually for. Football Supporters Europe gave those feelings institutional language. The organization described FIFA as having abused its monopoly position. They filed a formal complaint with the European Commission. They used the phrase monumental betrayal to describe the gap between what was promised to fans on ticket pricing and what was ultimately delivered. That statement, shared widely across fan community social media in multiple languages, was read not as dry, regulatory language, but as official confirmation of something that millions of fans had already been posting for months. Someone with standing was now saying formally what the comment sections had been saying informally. Supporters groups in the United States echoed the sentiment. American Outlaws, the largest supporters network for the USMNT, had been relatively measured in public statements through the early months of the year. But the combination of the pricing investigation, the seating category complaints, and the sustained public pressure produced a shift in tone. The idea that fans who had followed this national team through thin years and thinner years to finally arrive at a home World Cup were now being priced out of attendance was not an abstraction to people who had spent decades in that stadium section. Here is a layer of this story that deserves specific attention because it changes how you understand the overall social media picture. Not everything viral about this World Cup has been accurate. A significant portion of the content that has spread most widely contains claims that have not held up under scrutiny. A TikTok video published in late May of 2025, which accumulated over 800,000 views, claimed that FIFA was facing a massive logistical crisis because thousands of fans and coaches were refusing to travel, and that the United States was at risk of having the tournament relocated. The narrative was dramatic and specific, but Yahoo News and Snopes both fact-checked it. There was no evidence FIFA was considering moving any matches. The specific figures cited, thousands of confirmed refusals, imminent relocation proceedings, were not documented. Another claim that spread rapidly in April stated that the U.S. government would ban World Cup attendees based on social media screening for anti-Semitic content, and that European politicians would be barred as a group. IB Times UK reported that this was a significant exaggeration of what had actually been announced. The U.S. Special Envoy for Anti-Semitism stated clearly that every individual is assessed as an individual. The categorical group bans described in the viral posts were not what officials announced, and the original January Mohammed Sapa post, the one that started the earliest wave of ticket cancellation content, was reported on by Fox 4 Kansas City with an important clarification. The people claiming to have canceled tickets were most likely referring to their applications in a ballot draw that had already closed before their posts. Once a ballot window closes, there is no active application to cancel in the traditional sense. The post spread as a wave of confirmed mass cancellations. The mechanism it described was not quite how the system worked. The earlier Georgia Today reporting on the wider cancellation wave is worth noting here as well. Claims circulated that nearly 17,000 international fans had canceled tickets specifically over U.S. immigration policy. Independent verification of that figure remained limited, and global demand for the tournament continued at historically high levels, according to FIFA's own data. None of this means the underlying concerns are fabricated or overblown. The visa uncertainties are real and documented. The pricing problems are now the subject of active law enforcement investigation. The seating category bait and switch complaints are confirmed and specific. The sentiment of the social media movement reflects genuine experiences and fears that enormous numbers of people actually had. But the gap between what is accurate and what spreads fastest is itself part of the story. Because in that gap, FIFA has found both its most damaging critics and, on occasion, its most effective defensive cover. When a claim can be fact-checked and found wanting, FIFA's communications operation points to it and characterizes the entire social media conversation as misinformation. When a claim holds up, the $1.5 million resale listing, the Category 1 to Category 2 reassignments, the Attorney General subpoenas, FIFA says nothing at all. The selective silence and the selective debunking have become their own communication strategy, one that does not require FIFA to answer the questions that actually have answers. What the social media story has produced 10 days before kickoff is a tournament that exists in two entirely parallel versions at the same time. The official version, unprecedented demand, 500 million ticket applications, record revenue projections, the largest sporting event in human history. A once-in-a-generation celebration of the global game arriving in the country that has spent decades working to earn its place at football's top table. The social media version, prices that most fans cannot afford, seats that were not what was advertised, an international fan base partially locked out by travel restrictions and visa uncertainty, a governing body now under formal law enforcement investigation just 10 days before the tournament begins. Both of those versions contain truth. The question is which one the tournament itself, the actual football once it starts, will confirm or complicate. Because social media has a very specific relationship with live sporting events. It amplifies grievance powerfully in the build-up, but it also amplifies joy powerfully once the action begins. A genuinely extraordinary goal, a stunning upset, a moment of individual brilliance in front of a packed stadium that remembers exactly why it came. Those things spread on the same platforms that have been carrying boycott content, sometimes faster, sometimes further. The 2022 World Cup's defining social media moment was not the human rights debate that preceded it. It was Morocco reaching the semifinal. It was the image of Moroccan players prostrating on the pitch and their fans producing scenes of color and noise that the whole world sat down and watched and genuinely felt. That moment did not resolve the controversy around Qatar, but it occupied the conversation in a way the controversy could not compete with. 10 days from now, something is going to happen at the Azteca that will set the social media tone for the first 48 hours of this tournament. A goal, a save, an atmosphere, a moment that football produces when it decides to remind everyone why it still matters. Whether that moment is enough to shift the conversation away from the investigation, the pricing structure, and the hotels that are not filling up, or whether this tournament has traveled too far down the road, it has been on for football alone to pull it back. That is the question the next 6 weeks will answer.